the roll calls kept increasing for our misfortune to the Wachslinger block, they bought us pitilessly, weeping night and day, shouting constantly, "Mother dear," we were told and assured that they were consumed in the fire. In the gas chambers, asphyxiated or burned in the fire, children without sin to the sound of music were burned. Disastrous Auschwitz that ruined our families, who were used to the best in life, dragged off without compassion. They put together trains for us, from camp to camp they moved us. At the end of the journey, they took us to Belsen, human grave where we lost our sisters. Great numbers of young women died from hunger and a wretched life. There is neither ink nor paper to describe the life in Belsen. Turnip peelings and of death, water to drink.
Thank you. But what really happened on the 23rd of July 1944? I call upon Laura, the granddaughter of late Stella Sigora, who married Moise Israel, president of a community, and wrote a memorial in 1964 to share with her grandmother's soul.
Stella Israel. As you were told now, she wrote it on the 12th of May 1964. My name is Stella Sigura, born in Rhodes Island on the 4th of September 1926, married to Moise Israel on the 24th of November 1946. On the 20th of July 1944, we were deported by the Germans, together with my mother, only because we were Jewish. After a long trip on fishing boats, and without anybody worrying to give us something to drink or to eat, this trip lasted for 8 days. We finally arrived at Piraeus, Greece. As soon as we were disembarked, we were loaded on the lorries and transported to Haidari, a place that I believe was a prison. And in that place, with the terrible heat being July, we stayed there for a few days. When we arrived, we had to take off our clothes, and were completely naked in front of the German soldiers, who were looking for something, but I don't know for what, because before our departure, they already took everything from us. But I think they were doing that only for the pleasure of maltreating and abusing us continuously. In Haidari, we were staying in different lagers. After another perquisitions in another room to the one we were staying in, we had to run fast to return to our places. My mother, who was already weak and aged before her time, she was only 52, who could not stand anymore. She was pushed with rifles and had to run. In Greece we stayed for a few days and we thought that the end of our lives was near, but we had no idea of what was waiting for us. Because one day, that I don't remember precisely, we were transported in animal wagons. The doors were closed from outside and only one little window was open, through which 60 people had to breathe. In each wagon we were mixed, with men, women, girls, boys, and babies, and anybody you can imagine what was mixed up there, because in a place of less than 1 meter, we had to sit, sleep, and do our necessities. Quite a number of our people died in this trip. It lasted 16 days, and on the 17th of August we arrived at a place that we thought was the end of our sufferings. As soon as the doors of the wagon were open, we noticed that we were in a concentration camp. We asked where we were, and the answer was Auschwitz. At the entrance we were separated from our beloved, with the promise we were going to see each other soon. But that was the last day I saw my mother. Again, with the rifles of the German soldiers in our backs, and without strength to make another step, we had to run a long way barefoot, and we were locked up in another lager. I remember that we arrived in the morning and they left us there until the evening. During the night, they deported us to another place, where again we had to undress ourselves. They cut our hair and marked us with a number in our arms, and completely naked took us to another place, where they had showers. They left us there for a long time, switching on and off the lights to frighten us, and then they brought inside some men, and we noticed that they were the boys from Rhodes Island who were deported with us. Only a human being can imagine the shame we resented that the boys have seen us naked and without hair. That same night they took us in lagers, and the next day when I asked where my mother was, the guards replied she was burnt in the gas chamber. So I suppose that my mother died on the 17th of August, 1944. During my stay in Auschwitz, I was working to the transport of bricks, and with cold snow because it was in January. I was nearly naked and just had on a pair of crooked shoes and rugs. I had to do kilometers working and transporting bricks, and God forbid if I had not the strength to continue. It's no use to continue to tell again how much I suffered in the camp of Auschwitz, because in the meantime, all the world knows of the savagery committed by the Germans. I stayed in Auschwitz for 3 months, and afterwards, on the infamous selections, I was deported to the concentration camp of Bergen-Belsen.
In Bergen-Belsen, I had to work in the latrines, because when I arrived there, it was like a desert, not even barracks, and we had to sleep in the stable until the barracks were ready. My body was already reduced like a phantom, full of boils, but I was scared to complain because I knew it was the end. In this factory, I worked for more than 2 months. I remembered that every morning we had to walk for more than 10 kilometers as the factory was in town. Every night we had to walk back to the barracks, and was so ridiculous to watch with the hair shaved and the shoes twisted and the rags torn. We were so ridiculous that people started to laugh and mock us. While in Dessau, there was a very strong bombardment, and immediately the Germans decided to send us to another concentration camp. We were loaded into lorries and then to the station, and then they put us in the wagons. We were locked from outside, and for many days we traveled without anybody worrying to give us something to drink or eat. Every second day they used to open the doors of the wagon and let us out for half an hour, and we had to look for something to eat. Sometimes herbs, or sometimes we looked into the pockets of the dead soldiers to find something. And that is the cause that in the end of this voyage I had dysentery. It was more than 10 days of this trip, when all of a sudden we noticed that all the Germans were running away. But a few soldiers there put us again into the wagons with only the machinist, and we arrived at Theresienstadt. When we arrived at this camp, I already had typhus, and I only remembered that they put me on a stretcher and took me to the hospital. When I regained consciousness again, they told me that the Russians were already in town and we were free. I stayed in hospital for 2 months, and then I was sent to another concentration camp near Vienna. I was already in Russian hands, but not completely free. In this new camp, I stayed for a long period, and finally, in September 1945, I returned to Italy, in Milano, without knowing where to stay or go. This is the end of my story, but it's only a summary, because if I had to write it in detail, I would be writing for more than 10 pages. I was a prisoner of the Germans for more than 10 months, but for me it was like 10 years. Even now I ask myself how it was possible to survive after so much suffering. I'm sure that God helped me, and He felt pity to see such a young girl of 18 years old go through so much. He gave me strength to make me come back into the world of living people.
Yes, sir.